Welcome back to the North American SPL. I'm totally joined here by Taco for some more North American action. We just saw Space Station and Trifecta qualify, but now we're going to see Noble against Flashpoint.
And E United technically still have a chance. I guess it all depends on how later on today plays out with AI against Luminosity. But more importantly, in this set, it's going to be Noble trying to fight and make sure that they try and avoid relegations.
That's true. Noble are standing at 7 points, whereas AI is at 6. That head-to-head record was a split, so it's going to be very important here. If Noble can clinch this set 2-0, then they avoid relegations.
And that would be pretty solid for that team, because I know that with the way that they've been performing lately, this is a team that's still set to grow and can keep getting better, really. So I think that they have a very solid chance to clinch out this set.
Absolutely. They had a slow start to this split, but week 3, everything just turned around for them. They found 2 nice victories, I believe, over E United and Team Allegiance. But week 4, they kind of staggered a little bit, avoiding Valencia, but keeping their dreams alive here, avoiding relegations would be a nice little stepping stone for them heading to that fall split.
And this is a team that you can definitely tell has really just been developing their team chemistry over time. They've been playing so well as a unit, and being able to clinch out those 50-minute games, such as against teams that are pretty formidable opponents like E United, you can just tell that this team's probably definitely been preparing for this moment.
It just seems to me that Skeeledon and Aquarius joining this roster has been nothing but positive for the black and yellow squad out of Noble. So as we head into picks and bans for game number 1, we're going to see the homework done by both of these teams to see what kind of comfort picks they're going to do for themselves, or if there's going to be any target bans.
I don't think that there's any surprise here with the Circuit immediately being banned away. I wouldn't be surprised to see Noble opt for a Fafnir, Terra, Susano, some of those pretty standard picks, and Osiris, that's another one. They don't want to have to worry about that early game pressure.
It's always annoying to have to deal with either the Osiris or the Bellona. Despite the Death's Toll nerf, you're really not wanting to deal with those two options, especially if you want to play a relatively safe god in that solo lane. The rise of the Sun Wukong recently, so that could be an option for Aquarius in that lane, but Naja banned away from Skeeledon.
And that's a completely target bans all across the board from Flashpoint, opting for the Soul first pick, which is a very strong mid lane selection, especially as of late. Noble are going to respond with the Ganesha, and I think you can't really go wrong with the Elephant.
Not at all. Wubbn has been practicing this god quite recently and very often as well, so being paired up here with Wowy, we're going to see a lot of aggression probably in that duel lane, and a very early Erlang Shen pick, something that we haven't really seen too often here in Season 4.
I wouldn't be surprised if this was Erlang in the jungle as opposed to the solo lane, just because Aquarius will probably just want to wait out as far as his solo lane god is concerned, and Noble right now, they have the opportunity to choose the flex picks. They could opt for their solo laner or their hunter here, considering that Flashpoint's already opted for the Soul, Nemesis, and Fafnir.
That's true. Noble do have that last pick potential, but instead of waiting it for the counter matchup, they're going to lock in Bellona immediately before the secondary ban phase, really wanting to give Aquarius the slight edge in that lane. Nemesis, though, very aggressive option here for Flashpoint.
This could be a little bit of a concern for Noble, just considering that Nemesis is a tank shredder, and when you have 3 incredibly tanky guys such as Ganesh, Erlang, and Bellona, that's pretty much a field day for Nemesis most of the time.
I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if Mirage really tries to focus out Wubbn here, because when Wubbn first played Ganesha, I think it was against Luminosity, actually, they just heavily focus fired him every single time, so that could see a repeat here.
And it is going to be Noble trying to eliminate as many of those solo lane options for Flashpoint as possible, getting rid of the Hercules and the Robin. Those are some pretty comfort picks for Whalrus, so definitely smart decisions, but he is just going to head straight for the Sun Wukong.
And I'm really not surprised to see Sun Wukong on him, despite his fame with the Vamana. He usually likes the Vamana or the Amaterasu for those teamfight potentials, but the way the Gladiator Shield meta kind of risen to fame here, Sun Wukong benefits the most out of this pick, and Cernunnos is going to be the last pick selection for Flashpoint. Do you expect this to be Cernunnos mid or Soul mid?
I would have to anticipate the Soul mid, Kern going to the duo lane, just because Soul fits a little bit more towards ManRay's playstyle, and ManRay has shown a little bit of favor towards Soul in the past. I really like the Medusa selection by Noble. I think the Medusa Ganesh is a pretty strong composition, considering you've got the silence on that Ganesh to really like it, so it's difficult to avoid getting away from the slow off the Petrify, if not getting hit by it, and just their acid spray.
Well, when I think of Wowy, I usually think of Cupid, but it's going to be the Medusa for him this time. Let's head into game 1 from Noble against Flashpoint. Flashpoint are yet without a single victory in this summer split.
A little bit of the sanguine flashbacks, but this time around for NA. And I mean, one thing about Flashpoint is we've gone over it before. This is a team that's been shifting around their rosters a lot, and then on top of that, these are like newer players to the scene. Speaking of newer, Whalrus is trying to do what he can to prevent this Noble roster from clearing out this first wave, but...
We saw Team Allegiance actually do this earlier on, and Whalrus did a good job disrupting Aquarius, allowing Mirage to actually make this rotation, trying to go for another kill, but Whalrus needs to make the decision between trying to get his wave versus defending this buff. It's just not really worth it here at all for Flashpoint, rather, so Noble getting off to a great start, and the whole idea behind that proxy farming is the minions in the jungle don't spawn until 30 seconds anyway. The waves under the side lanes will reach the middle point at 30 seconds, so you have that small 10 to 15 second window to look for that proxy.
Plus, the primary advantage there is that Skeeledon and Aquarius have excellent level 1 clears in comparison to Whalrus, who made the decision to commit to his 72 transformations. Having only the knockup available really prevented him from having follow-up with Mirage.
And despite being able to cancel out the bludgeon, it's still not really enough because Bellona still wields the hammer, still has those AoE cleave in hands, and it's very easy to clear out the minion wave, especially when you're accompanied by another god that has an AoE cleave in his kit.
And it's going to be Noble locking down those oracles as well. So already a pretty strong start all around for Noble, considering that Aquarius is now 2 levels up on Whalrus, and it's only a couple of minutes into the game.
We saw yesterday in the European scene just what a little bit of pressure in the Soul Lane can do to be able to snowball, as there was a lot of Wukong players that were able to really make that rotation happen. Specifically, I believe it was No Numbers that made quite a few rotations happen on that Wukong. So we could see a lot of things happen here for Aquarius, this time playing the Bellona that has the edge over Whalrus. Still only sitting at level 2, not a spot you want to be in, especially without a blue buff.
And another massive concern here for Flashpoint is that when you have the enemy soul laner and jungler get so far ahead and your own soul laner so far behind, it really prevents Flashpoint from having contest on later buff cycles. So what I anticipate Noble to start doing is as soon as those buffs start spawning, it's just going to be Aquarius, Skeely, and most likely Stealth Join or Wubbn invading Flashpoint's jungle off cooldown, especially in that solo lane side.
A slow and steady checklist for Noble as they're going to try to take a victory here over Flashpoint, a team that's been struggling very heavily ever since Season 3 ended. They just can't find their new identity, switching out players every so often, and this has not been looking too good for them. And how do you think their mentality is going to be approaching towards the fall split?
I wouldn't be surprised if there was maybe another couple of roster swaps heading for this team, but personally I would prefer if they were to stick together, although I imagine it to be a little bit unlikely. I do think that this team could have potential if they were able to just lock in one solid team roster, but it's just too many different possibilities, especially when it comes to NA, who tends to lean a little bit more towards swapping out players rather than sticking together because certain players are just trying to find that team chemistry.
At 0 points currently, Flashpoint are guaranteed to go in the relegations as the last seeded North American team, and it's going to be very important for them to get out of those relegations for their mental health. It's never a good feeling whenever an SPL team gets dropped back down into the Challenger Circuit team, but just like you were mentioning before, Noble are looking for that experience advantage by invading the speed buff.
And already Shadowq being poked out so heavily that Whirlwind is doing so much damage.
I like the fact that Shadowq is holding on to his ultimate a little bit, waiting for the ultimate potentially from stealth to avoid that with the immunity frames, but all that poke damage is going to allow Noble this security of the speed buff. Nice little knockup from Whalrus, but he took a lot of poke in return.
Aquarius doesn't care about that poke at all because Noble's already able to secure that speed buff, and now they're headed straight for blue, which I can't really see Flashpoint having a chance of stealing.
Not at all, especially with MLC Self still around the corner here. Mirage will use that ultimate. Here comes Spirit. The 9-wind's knocking up to Eagles Rally is not going to hit. Aquarius needs to retreat here, but Shadowq is forced to do the same.
I think that was a slightly missed opportunity by Noble. Just the Eagles rally coming up a little bit short. Could have very easily looked for the bludgeon afterwards, although it probably would have been interrupted by Whalrus. I do think that was a great disengage by Flashpoint to not lose 2 members after MLC's ultimate.
And a huge victory for Noble. Despite not finding any kills or the first blood bounty, they find the speed and the blue buff invade and shutting down Whalrus even further. Look at his mana pool. He had to go back to base here, and as a result, Aquarius sitting at level 7 already. He's going to get only more experience as he's going to approach his own blue buff.
And Sun Wukong is such a mana-dependent god that when you lack that blue buff in the early game, you're only going to continue to struggle. There's really nobody on the side of Flashpoint who can afford to go and assist Whalrus in that right-hand jungle, because Mirage, Nemesis is great for shredding tanks, but you have to play the early game a little bit slower unless you get a phenomenal start. Nemesis isn't one of those gods that comes out swinging.
And it's going to be very easy for Aquarius just to continue this advantage before there's any MP5 selection. Hold that thought, though. A lot of damage dealt onto Shadowq. ManRay is going to get aggressed on as well by Skeeledon, but not going to take the risk towards diving that tier 1 tower. Didn't even commit to the ultimate, really trying to force these engagements in the jungle instead.
I think what Noble are really looking to do here is just force some actives. The sooner that they can force actives out of Flashpoint, the better. And Aquarius, speaking of force, he just forced that solo onto Whalrus.
2-level advantage. No ultimate either for the Sun Wukong. Ultimate out of MLC stuff. Gold Fury going in the way of Noble, just sneaking that right under the noses of Flashpoint. A little bit of a mistimed ultimate from MLC stuff as it didn't fully confirm it, but either way, great call from Noble securing this first objective.
Flashpoint's probably just underneath so much chaos in their comms. You got Whalrus who's probably calling out that he's dying just because Aquarius is doing such an excellent job pressuring the massive advantage that he was given.
And normally whenever your soul laner is struggling, it's your team that has the struggling soul laner that starts a Gold Fury trying to force a rotation one way or the other, but it's actually Noble being able to control all aspects of the map, not even 7 minutes into the game.
And I mean, just look at their composition though. That is the ideal early secure for the Gold Fury. You've got MLC Stealth who will deal massive damage to objectives right now, especially if he's able to just free cast on them. Ganesha is another god who's excellent with those Dharmic Pillars as far as shredding of objectives is concerned. So all around, just so much easy secure. That was a quick shred.
So are you saying that Noble just clearly outdrafted Flashpoint? Oh, hold that thought though, in the speed buff. A secondary invade. They were successful the first time around. They didn't find any kills, but a huge amount of damage out of Aquarius. He's not done yet. He's even going to force out 2 ultimates from Flashpoint. Ultimate from Stealth. He's going to force Whalrus into the clouds. Aquarius is getting distracted by Shadowq for a little bit. Going to turn into a little piggy as Sops makes this rotation. So at least Flashpoint will find one.
And I mean, that's still a strong pickup, but Whalrus is going to end up falling as well, and it looks like Sops is shortly after. He clips that tornado just because it's perfectly blocking off that pathway.
He had nowhere to go. He either had to commit under that tier 2 tower, or he walks back into 3 members out of Noble. It was a nice little rotation from Sops, which allowed the kill onto Aquarius, but Wowy was just freely farming on the left, makes the half rotation just to secure a 1 wave in the middle lane, and guess what? He even got 75% of that tower's health.
And the other problem too, Noble secures those buffs anyway. Whalrus's blue is still available, I believe, but losing the speed buff yet again, as well as 3 members of your team, that's just always 2 members of your team. That's always an unfortunate circumstance.
Level 7 on the side of Mirage, and this god was the first god that I think he played in the SPO, and he played very aggressively on this god, being able to just dive towers freely. I think it was actually against Team Envious, if I'm not mistaken, in Season 3, the beginning of Season 3, I think when he was under the Randozos, but picking it this early in the draft in this first game, it's just not really working out as intended. Do you think that the strategy of the proxying farm from Noble just completely shut down the momentum from Mirage?
Focusing out Whalrus's lane was probably the best thing that Noble could have done. We've seen plenty of teams before in the past when they face off against Flashpoint, they tend to just target out that solo lane because Whalrus is probably one of the members with the largest chance of popping off on this team. So if you effectively shut him out, you give your Bellona a 2-level lead, which is exactly what the proxy farm accomplishes, and there's really just no response to it. When you look at the rest of the team from Flashpoint, this is a team that's relying on making it to that mid-late game stage, and they're not given the opportunity to.
So if you draft a mid to late game stage composition such as Flashpoint, and you know Noble is going to be proxy farming you, how do you react to that? Do you try to proxy in the dual lane?
I think they could have either proxied in the dual lane, or they could have just looked for buff invades off the bat.
Just like clearing out mid.
They should have just gone mid immediately to Flashpoint's jungle and then look to secure their buffs from there, because they had a much higher likelihood of at least securing that speed and returning to their own base. Or even if Whalrus were to join them in the mid lane and ManRay and Mirage, Whalrus would have had enough damage.
Ultimate from Stealth, deleting Mirage under that tier 1 tower, stunned out under the tier 1, forcing out ManRay though under the tier 2. This level 12 Bellona is an absolute monster for Flashpoint. There's just no response.
There's nothing that they can do. When you Aquarius on Bellona in level 12, There's really just no way. The bludgeon is swinging for half of ManRay's health bar right now, and it's just going to be a complete struggle for Flashpoint from here on out.
And because Whalrus was level 10, he did not make that rotation. He secured the last bit of the Fire Giant Elementals before they fizzled from that 10-minute marker. Securing the Portal Demon will be Noble, just extending their goal lead beyond that 5,000 gold marker.
And it's the experience difference.
Wow.
It's not even the gold that really matters here. Sure, 5K is always awful at 10.5 minutes, but when you're down 10K XP, that's a problem.
Hey, guess what? Mirage got his first speed buff of the game. But seriously though, whenever a team is on pace to get a 1,000 experience lead per minute played, that's probably a telltale sign of like something clearly went wrong, and this is not being adapted to by Flashpoint any single way. Usually whenever you look at a composition that has a Fafnir, you're looking like, oh, okay, they want to do objectives, right? They want to get off the Draconic form, they want to get that AoE coerce online and really melt these objectives. But on the flip side, it's been Noble controlling every part of the map.
And speaking of controlling, Skeely's trying to control sops right now, using that Fatalis effect to his advantage. He's just going to dive him. He has no concerns at all. Picking up the kill so easily onto sops. His damage is just untouchable right now.
And still having the ultimate now. Will heal in about 1 second, using that turtle just for a little bit of a bubble. The ultimate from Stealth, going to knock up Shadowq. Not worried at all, but the Golfier respawns, and yet again, Noble diving tier 2 dueling, getting the Golfier at the same time. They're doing this double two-man split on one side of the map, and Flashpoint, they're just so far behind that nothing really matters. Everything is dominated by Noble.
Skeely's level 12, MLC is now 13. Aquarius has been a raid boss since like minute 3 of this game. It's all around just well executed by Noble. They had their strategy to just push their solo lane pressure as much as they could, and it's worked out superbly for them.
Do you think like now it's just over for Flashpoint? Are they talking about
100%.
game number 2?
You got to just start talking about game 2 here. I don't realistically see any sort of comeback potential for Flashpoint.
But you don't expect a surrender here, do you, at all? Like, not anytime soon, at least.
I wouldn't be opposed to a surrender in this kind of circumstance, just to reevaluate, focus on game number 2, keep your heads in the game. But, I mean, playing it out isn't a bad thing either, because at the very least, they can still get a little bit of experience as far as playing from a drastic behind lead.
That's true. They still need to figure out their identity here. Whalrus, he did take a break there in one of his earlier sets, now coming back in here in week number 5. A little bit too late into the action here, but either way, still needing to make something happen here. Heading into the 13-minute mark, Flashpoint still struggling at about 7,000 gold behind. They need to figure out a way to really shut down the momentum from Skeeledon that's just diving these tier 2 towers freely.
It's just going to take so long for Mirage and ManRay to even get their second actives online. Not to mention that Shadowq is going to be struggling as well, only having the Sunder available. But even with the Sunder and a Nemesis ult, the rest of Flashpoint is just so starved of XP. They don't have any realistic damage to follow up with.
And look what Mirage did with his item choices here. He sold off his starter item just to be able to finish off that Brawler's Beatstick. That's how you could tell you're in true desperation mode when you're trying to finish off that power spike, but you're going to be able to sacrifice whether or not that was a Bluestone Pendant or the Bumba's Mask.
And Sops also went for a little bit riskier build. And speaking of risky, apparently Noble doesn't even want to let Flashpoint farm out their back Harpies.
Ultimate from Stealth, chunking Whalrus away. He doesn't even have time to go into the clouds. Eagle's Rally just is going to zone away along with those Dharmic Pillars. Noble yet again invading another speed buff. Just no response from Flashpoint.
In MLC Stealth, whenever a mid laner is playing zone duty, that's always a rough time for an enemy team. He's going to get away with double stacking as well.
It seems that way. They just have so much of a lead here, and Book of Thoth on this Kukulkan makes perfect sense. We actually saw it yesterday in Europe as well. I forgot who was building into it, but it works out so beautifully because of the way the Kukulkan passive works.
And it's just never can go wrong with mana when your passive only channels that into more power.
Absolutely, especially when you scale so well into the late game. And just for more good safety measures, MLC Stealth, like he's been nicknamed the, what is it, MLC Renewal? Like Mail of Renewal was the Mail of Stealth or whatever it was called back in the day that he used to build, because he likes to go for these survival options in the mid game once he does build a little bit of an early game lead.
Well, it's a perfect strategy going with the Warlock Sash too, because I'm convinced that this is going to be a Warlock Sash. I just don't really see him opting for anything else since he is pretty keen to going towards that double stacking option. And really the big thing that I'm keeping an eye on is even if he were to get Nemesis ulted, that additional health that he would be provided would come up pretty clutch for him.
Absolutely. You're really looking for more health than the protections. Wouldn't even be surprised to maybe see a Wingblade if he's wanting to play super safe just to negate the slow and get a little bit of a movement speed boost on top of this. Whalrus trying to get any sort of farm that he can. 3 levels behind Aquarius. One of the... Now, that is a big deficit, but that's the least deficit in all of Flashpoint, with the exception of these 2 supports, level 12 versus level 10 here.
Well, you've also got Sops, I think, who's been hanging pretty well, all things considered, because when your team is down so much global gold and you're still able to maintain at least a 2-level gap, I'd say that's a pretty solid farm job by Sops, especially since it's so easy for Noble to just pressure him out anytime he tries to show up. He opted for the Devourer's Gauntlets, which goes to show that he's just trying to help delay and look for the late game possibility, if anything.
A lot of objective control from Noble as they're going to try to secure their Portal Demon here for the second time. It's going to get started and completed by Noble. Not in time as ManRay with that Supernova diving into the back. Going to miss that Eagles rally to separate. Going to buy ManRay a little bit of time. Beads being used by Sops, but he's going to get chased down.
And unfortunately, the Wild Hunt had to be expended just to deter Skeeledon from chasing him up. Skeely did use his ultimate as well, though, but ManRay, now he doesn't have his beads available. He has the opportunity to back to base if he wants to pick up an Aegis, but with the Gold Fury spawning, if he backs, that's just another free objective.
And that's why Skeeledon didn't opt to dive that tier 2 tower, hold that thought, ultimate deleting Sops yet again. Stealth doing so much damage with his Kukulkan, fully finished, almost fully finished stacking of the Book of Thoth. Now trying to stack up that Warlock Sash, this level 16 Kukulkan, as if the level 16 Bellona and Erlang Shen wasn't enough. Now they got to worry about the Spirit of the 9 Winds from the Kukulkan.
This is great synergy between Noble as well. Skeeledon with the knockups is perfect setup for him. We'll see stealth, but Aquarius actually might have put himself into a position he doesn't want to be in. He's just trying to run away right now. He's got the rest of his team following him up, and I think that he's going to fall.
Dharmic Pillars being used just to zone a little bit. Whalrus will take out Aquarius, but at what cost? They're trying to find the return kill and some redemption for their fallen brethren. Whalrus will take a spill. Shadowq, not much man on his side. 2 members dead from Flashpoint. Mirage trying to sneak away his speed buff, but yet again, just one and done. Skeeledon says, no more speed buffs for you, buddy.
And Aquarius can kind of just choose to be reckless with his life right now. He doesn't really need to be the super tanky frontliner. He's got that Hide of the Urchin and the Gladiator Shield. This is an incredibly aggressive build, and it looks like he's opting for his shifters.
And the reason why Noble didn't help out Aquarius even faster was they were a little too preoccupied getting their 3rd Gold Fury of the game, their gold lead over that 10,000 gold mark. Now catching up with the experience lead that they built up for themselves, looking very solid for the black and yellow squad here.
It's just 5 and 4 level disparities between the mid jungle support roles. That's probably 3 of the worst roles to be this far behind on, just because you kind of need your mid and jungle especially to be catalysts, and it's just that trickle down effect. Unfortunately for Mirage, because Noble were able to secure that early proxy farm that pushed Aquarius to be so far ahead, when your enemy solo laner has that much aggression, there's just no contest for your buffs.
So looking at Flashpoint and looking at Shadowq specifically, he's a very heavy theory crafter, and I'm expecting him to try to think of ways to get back into this set for game number 2. And speaking of him theory crafting, he's actually also plays Hand of the Gods tournament. He actually lost to one of the finalists here, Mr. C4, that's going to be playing later on after the North American SPL is finished, though. In the dual lane, a lot of action from Skeeledon trying to chase down Sops. Going to look for the 1v1 here with that ultimate being popped. Will get the health return. No action for Sops, but he's just relying on Mirage to bail him out.
Unfortunately for Sops, that ultimate from Mirage just came a little bit too late, and I don't think it would have saved his life anyway. Mirage can't help out his jungler or his hunter right now. He's level 11 and just trying to rush as much pen items as possible. It's just kind of to no avail right now. He just got so ripped of his jungle early on that it becomes nearly impossible for our Nemesis to catch back up.
Even the ultimate through the wall was just not really enough to do anything, just not in the nick of time. Solo lane action, dual lane action, not going to connect on the dragon that time around from Stealth, who's been pretty consistent this whole game from hitting it. But either way, it's just a little bit of a stall tactic to allow Wowy and Skeeledon to take advantage of the kill onto Sops by getting that tier 2 tower in the dual lane. But now will transition all their forces towards that middle lane.
And honestly, I think Flashpoint have done a pretty solid job here of at least not just dying repeatedly. I say that as ManRay might potentially be getting dove here, but I think that all around they know that they have to slow down the pacing of this game, or at least just try to stalemate it out as long as possible so that way Noble don't just completely overrule any chances of a comeback. But it's just a little bit of too little too late. It's just so difficult to come back from such an early deficit.
So from Flashpoint's point of view here, what are you looking at? Are you looking to ban the Bellona, or are you looking to pick it yourself? Because that proxy farm tactic, it just seemed to really take things out of control. But hold that thought though, Aquarius yet again caught in an awkward position between the tier 1 and tier 2 where he used to stand. Still has his ultimate, could use it to get away, but the separation, that Flashpoint, they're trying to cover every single option.
And I think they did an excellent job of covering out all these avenues. Now Skeeledon's here to provide assistance though. Swaps has made the rotation and he will clean up Aquarius with the Wild Hunt.
ManRay is in a lot of trouble, going to get chased down by Skeeledon. The ultimate from Shadowq being used just to help out his mid lane. It will successfully keep them alive, but Stealth is trying to wrap around the corner, not in range to find the Gus, but will look for the kills on the tanky targets.
And already forced into his Aegis. This is some solid DPS output by sops. He's the highest level on his team next to Whalrus, who's following up at level 16, but that pickup of the Executioner, his build is dealing a decent bit of damage now.
And with those stacks of the Devil Gloves, he's able to take some of these 1v1 skirmishes. Surprisingly to see this item built on a Cernunnos who already has lifesteal in his kit, but now that means you don't have to go into that spring stance here. Wobbn is going to try to zone out some members while Noble secure themselves that third portal demon, doing a great job staying on top of all of these objectives.
It's incredibly difficult for Flashpoint to try and contest the objective calls from Noble just because of that Kukulkan ultimate. Stealth's not one who's really going to be messing up these ultimate secures, and when you're trying to contest against the Kukulkan, if you get hit by that ultimate, that just means go for Noble.
Level 19, almost maxing out that ultimate ability. Highest level in the game, tied with Wowy currently. It's really scary for Flashpoint when you're almost dealing with a level 20 Hunter and mid-mage, not even 22 minutes into the game. Gold Fury has respawned here. Sops could look to potentially solo it. He has lifesteal in his kit. He has the Devil Gloves.
The crazy thing here, though, is that this has been an incredibly quiet game from Wowy. He really hasn't had to do much of anything. His team has just been so dominant in the solo and mid lane sections of the map that all Wowy has really had to do is farm.
That's a dream for a Hunter whenever your team is just not feeding their brains out in the early game, right? So that way you can actually make an impact, but it's obviously helps when they are actually carrying. That way you're just looking pretty.
And I mean, he's got 3k damage. He legitimately has not had a chance to even try and DPS down the members of Flashpoint because they're either forced back to base or dead.
Noble getting themselves that first Fire Giant of the game. They're looking to close out the first game of this set after they get this tier 2 tower on the right-hand side. Trying to siege down this Phoenix. Flashpoint Needle will figure out how to hold this one, but here comes the Girdle.
And already it's going to be an ultimate coming out onto Skeeledon, who's actually just blown up from Nemesis and everybody else from Flashpoint.
Whalrus forced to retreat as well as sops. Shadowq going to stun out Aquarius, keeping a lot of members alive. The Stunner coming out from Mirage. Tornado, though, is going to prevent the rest of Flashpoint from defending that Phoenix. So Noble get what they came for. They got the Phoenix. Despite losing Skeeledon, definitely worth because of how long they have this Fire Giant buff.
That was half a ManRay, so I think ManRay's going to die. No,
Ooh.
The Aegis is going to be enough to save his life, but that damage that he took from MLC's one alone was insane.
Okay, so do you expect a Kukulkan ban after this kind of a nonsense, or do you expect more of this early solo jungle attention?
I don't think that they need to bank the Kukulkan. I think if anything, Flashpoint just need a little bit more early pressure. Their draft is a little bit too high execution, I think, for the team still trying to find their footing with each other, that it's just better to play the safer picks.
Do you even expect them to go off the A-wall and pick like really wacky picks in the second game?
I wouldn't anticipate that. I don't think that Flashpoint are a team who are interested in doing something unconventional or super crazy. I think they just want to focus on finding their own strategies to win.
Eagles rally, going to stun out Whalrus away from the Ox form. He doesn't have the ultimate and he doesn't have a life anymore. Wowy gets his first kill of the game, trying to make some noise.
A little bit of overkill there from Stealth.
He just wants the top player damage of the game. Look at him, topping the charts right above Skeeledon. You know he's spamming that T button.
Probably so, but if I'm Flashpoint, I'm trying not to spam my F6 right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Flashpoint are in a world of hurt here. They're down 15,000 gold. They're without their right side Phoenix, and there still needs to be able to try to defend these last two Phoenixes. I wouldn't even be surprised if Noble even just tried to go straight for that Titan room if they could just find a couple of picks.
Well, the way that MLC has been playing this Kukulkan as well is he's been dropping his tornadoes in areas that try to prevent the pathing for a Flashpoint to contest these Phoenixes. In that last Phoenix siege, he zoned out the members of Flashpoint. I just think that it's such great placement, and if it comes to the Titan, as long as his ultimate is available, I think that Flashpoint could, Noble could very easily secure it.
25 minutes into the game, and Stealth has finally finished off stacking that Warlock Sash. Don't try this at home, kids. Very risky to go for Toth and this Warlock Sash, but Girdle has been popped in the mid lane. Noble looking to get their second Phoenix of the game. Wubbn forced to retreat for a little bit. On the backside, it's going to be Whalrus ultimate from Stealth. Going to delete Mirage and chunk Shadowq. Aquarius looking to follow up in the Titan room. Skeeledon will find the second kill against Flashpoint. Titan is going to get melted.
And Whalrus might be behind them. Sops is able to pick up Wubbn, who was going for that aggression onto Whalrus, but it doesn't matter. The rest of Noble had their eyes set for that Titan, and already game number 1 is in their hands.
Great play from Noble. They secure themselves 1 point so far after that game, but if they win the next one now, they're guaranteed to avoid relegation. So this next game is actually more important than the last.
And of course, this set overall has just been really important for Noble. They're not looking to put themselves into relegations, and with the way that they've been playing in these past couple of weeks, and now even today, I think has been really clean for the team all around.
Looking very clean for Skeeledon and Aquarius, well, outside some of the deaths, unnecessary deaths from Aquarius, but the early game pressure that Noble had against Flashpoint just goes to show how important it is to get this early control pressure, especially in the solo lane. If I'm Flashpoint, I'm looking back at that game and I'm thinking to myself, I either have to stop this solo lane pressure or create some pressure on my own in the dual lane.
And that's really the big thing to take away for Flashpoint, is that they permitted the solo lane to kind of just run rampant. Aquarius just had too much too early on, and because of that, Mirage just found it so incredibly hard to try and farm up. He couldn't go anywhere in his jungle safely. All he could grab was his back Harpies, and the rest of his team was unfortunately unable to assist him. So I think the early game picks and bans is really what's going to control the way that this could play out.
Well, let's head